Welcome to Algebra 2, Unit 6, Lesson 15, Practice Problems. Here is a graph of a trigonometric function. Which equation could define this function? So first, let's look at some key parts here. First, you have the number that is being multiplied by sine or cosine. This is your amplitude. So A has an amplitude of 1.5. B has an amplitude of 1.5. C has an amplitude of -4. And D has an amplitude of -4. Next, we have inside parentheses. Whatever number you are multiplying by x tells you how many times it repeats every 2 pi. So, repeats 2 pi. B repeats 2 pi. C and D repeats 1.5 times every 2 pi. And finally, the number that you're adding or subtracting is your midline. So A and B, the midline is -4. C and D, the midline is 0. So now we need to look at the graph that we have and see which one of these matches. So first off, I can see my midline. My midline is -4. So that means C is wrong and D is wrong. Next, we look at our amplitude. The amplitude is 1.5. So both A and B could still be correct. Next, we're looking at how often it repeats. And we can see that if we start here, we finish the period here, the period is 2 pi. So A and B have the correct amplitude, they repeat every 2 pi, and they have the correct midline. Now we have to decide whether this is sine or cosine. If we shifted this up, it would be starting at 1.5, which means the normal would start at 1. cosine of 0 equals 1, sine of 0 equals 0. If we shifted this midline back up to 0 and we changed the amplitude back to 1, we would not start at the origin. We would be going through y equals 1. So that means we have a cosine. So A is wrong and B is correct. If you have any questions about how I solved this practice problem, please use class time to ask for further clarification. Select all the functions that have period of pi. So the number that we multiply by x tells us how many cycles we repeat every 2 pi. The period is how often a cycle completes. So, if we look at A, this completes 1/2 cycle every 2 pi. Its period is 4 pi. And B does the same. So it's not A and it's not B. C completes 1 cycle every 2 pi. Its period is 2 pi. So C is not correct. D and E complete 2 cycles every 2 pi. Their period is pi. That's what we're looking for. So D is correct and E is correct. Remember, the number you multiply by x tells you how many cycles it completes every 2 pi. So if I multiply by 1/2, then I complete 1/2 of a cycle every 2 pi, and it's going to take 4 pi to complete 1 cycle. If I multiply x by 1, it completes 1 cycle every 2 pi, and if I multiply x by 2, it completes 2 cycles every 2 pi, so its period is only 1 pi. If you have any questions about how I solved this practice problem, please use class time to ask for further clarification. Page 2. Sketch a graph of A of theta equals cosine of 3 theta. So remember, the number that I multiply theta by tells me how many full cycles I complete within 2 pi. So this is a cosine graph, and cosine graphs start at 1. It's going to go down and back up 3 times in 2 pi. So I'm going to put another point at 2/3 pi. It will complete a second cycle at 4/3 pi, and then a third cycle at 2 pi. Halfway between those points, it's going to hit -1. So -1 at pi over 3, -1 at pi, and -1 at pi over 3. On the way down, it will hit 0, and then 0 on its way back up. Then 0 on its way down, 0 on its way back up, 0 on its way down, and 0 on its way back up. So now we can draw our graph. So this is the graph of cosine 3 theta. Number 2 wants us to compare the graph of alpha to the graph of beta of theta, which is cosine of theta. So a normal cosine theta graph starts at 1, has a period of 2, it will hit -1 at pi, so it will hit 0 halfway and 0 halfway on its way back up. And now we can connect these points. And the blue line is cosine of theta. They want to know, how are the two graphs alike and how are they different? So, same midline, of 0, same amplitude of 1, different periods. Alpha of theta has a period of 2/3 pi, while B, or beta of theta, has a period of 2 pi. The only difference is what we are multiplying the angle by and what we multiply the angle by tells us how many full cycles happen within 2 pi. If you have any question about how I solved this practice problem, please use class time to ask for further clarification. The functions f and g are given by f of x equals cosine x and g of x equals cosine of 5x. How are the graphs of f and g related? This is very similar to the previous problem. Both have an amplitude of 1. Both have a midline of 0. Both are cosine waves with a y-intercept of 0, 1. F of x has a period of 2 pi, while g of x has a period of 2/5 pi. F of x will only complete one full cycle within 2 pi, but g of x will complete 5 full cycles in 2 pi. If you have any questions about how I answered any of the practice problems for today's lesson, please use class time to ask for further clarification.